Hi Bio20! In this video we're going to be talking about two different cycles. Okay, the first cycle we're going to go through is the sulfur cycle. And then we're also going to be going through the phosphorus cycle. Okay, you have to know both of these for your drawing quiz tomorrow. This is the outline for the sulfur cycle. If you guys want to pause it and kind of draw this to begin with, you should do that right now. Are you done? Good. So we're going to start with the living organisms. We have a rabbit, we have some bacteria in the soil, we have some trees. Okay, so just like any other element that we're talking about and the cycling of it, when we eat different organisms, so like a rabbit's eating some tree, they're going to get sulfur from that tree. Okay, and eventually the rabbit is going to die. The bacteria is going to get sulfur from that rabbit when it's breaking it down and decomposing it. Same with when the trees die. Okay, they're going to break down all of the sulfates and put them back into the soil. Okay, some of this sulfate can be picked up by plants and be reused, but some of it stays in the soil. So this is kind of the process that bacteria go through. They'll take sulfate, they'll make sulfur, and then they mix it with hydrogen to make hydrogen sulfide, H2S. So what is happening with this bacteria, some of them, is they're actually doing chemosynthesis. And chemosynthesis releases sulfur back into the atmosphere. Okay, and while we're talking about chemosynthesis, if I look at these deep sea vents, okay, really deep down in the ocean, they're also doing the process of chemosynthesis. So again, using sulfur compounds, instead of having light energy used to bond the sulfur compound together, it uses that energy to create glucose, like photosynthesis, but without light. So deep down in the ocean they do this, but also in the soil, because obviously there's not going to be light in the soil. They can do this process, and when they do that, they're going to be releasing sulfur into the atmosphere. Okay, so let's jump back to this process down here, what's happening in the bacteria. So we have our sulfur compounds hanging out in the soil. If they stay there for long enough and there's stuff falling on top of them, like soil and rocks and things like that, they'll eventually press down into rocks. So it's sulfur-containing rocks. So this is going to take obviously a very long time, thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, for us to create a rock. We just need pressure and time to do that. And then we're going to have two different ways that we can take the sulfur in these rocks and release it back into the atmosphere. So the first way would be a natural process. So something like a volcano erupting is going to release sulfur. Okay, geological uplifting would be like creating mountains. Now we have sulfur compounds on the top of mountains, and then we would go through a process of erosion to release that sulfur, okay, into the atmosphere. And then also if we use groundwater and we use upwelling, it can also release some sulfur into the atmosphere. So that right here is a volcano, okay, releasing sulfur into a cloud. This cloud would contain sulfur dioxide. We could also do man-made processes like mining and fossil fuels, which if we're going to burn mined compounds or the fossil fuels, that would also create sulfur dioxide. So how we release this sulfur dioxide from the atmosphere and put it back into the ground, sulfur dioxide combines with water, which creates sulfuric acid, okay, which is known as acid rain, okay, or acid precipitation. So that's going to come down as acid rain. But I'm going to mention that more in class when we talk about the kind of environmental impacts of each cycle. So that is the sulfur cycle. You guys can draw this out a couple times, make sure you know it really well. But we're going to move on now to the phosphorus cycle. So again, this is kind of the outline I'm going to be using for the phosphorus cycle. If you guys can draw this, pause the video so that I can just, as I talk, you're drawing it with me. Are you done? Good. I'm going to continue. So again, we're going to have some living organisms taking up these phosphorus compounds. So I drew a moose and we have a tree. Okay, the moose is going to eat the tree, and both of these things are eventually going to die. When these things die, they get broken down by decomposers. Okay, so like earthworms and little insects and bacteria and centipedes and things like that, which is going to put the phosphates back in the soil, which can then be taken up again by trees and then be eaten again by animals. Okay, so that just happens over and over and over again, and we call this the fast cycle of phosphorus because it's happening fairly fast. Okay? Sometimes the phosphates in the soil can leach or basically absorb into bodies of water. So now we have phosphates that are dissolved in a solution or water. Eventually they'll fall to the bottom of that body of water, and through the process of sedimentation, they form rock. So again, sediments falling to the bottom of the water, more sediments fall on top, so mud and dirt and particles falling on top and on top and on top and on top. And eventually, once you have a really thick layer of stuff on top, that's really heavy. So it's going to press down this stuff into rocks over thousands of years. Okay, these rocks can eventually form mountains, again, over a very long period of time, which we call geological uplifting. Okay, so again, you guys can probably notice that this is going to be the slow process of phosphorus. Okay, this time it's taking thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of years to do this versus maybe a month. Okay, in the fast cycle. When we combine the slow cycle and the fast cycle, we use the water cycle to do that. Okay, so we have precipitation happening, raining down on our mountains that we've just made through geological uplifting. So over time, this rain is going to cause weathering to happen. So erosion, basically. Wind and rain slamming against the mountain causes the mountain to basically have pieces of sand basically fall off. And that's going to be pushed through runoff back into the soil. And then we can use the phosphates in the soil again to be taken up by plants. And then we have this fast cycle happening more and more. So that is how we combine both the fast and the slow cycle of phosphorus. And that is all there is to it, the phosphorus cycle. So hopefully this makes sense to you. If you have any questions, of course, please ask in class. But if not, you'll just have to draw this out a couple times. And you'll come to class tomorrow prepared to draw both of these things on a drawing quiz. Hey, have a wonderful evening. I'll see you guys tomorrow. And have a good night.